All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. This is actually the third installment of the Mama to Mama chat. I am super excited today. I have one of my very, very good friends on from Iowa with a plethora of knowledge to share with all of us. Just given what's going on in the world, and also just to help us mamas kind of work through maybe some things that were underlying before this process, and now that this process has come up, what we are going to, what should help us throughout this kind of time period, and also to get us moving to better mental health. So my good friend, Dr. Danah, we'll call her today, Dr. Danah, is here, and she is a licensed psychologist in Iowa. And part of the reason I really wanted to have Danah talk to us today is just because I think so much of what I'm seeing and also experiencing is within this range of like being pressurized in our homes and dealing with new situations, things that we've never dealt with before, with added pressure of our kids being home all the time, all these things mounting is looking to me like, how are we surviving this pressure with like our old self-care routine? What is our new self-care routine? Can we not do that anymore? And like, how do we connect the dots with keeping ourselves happy and healthy so that we can best take care of our family from there? So without further ado, Miss Dr. Danah Brown. And it's so funny because Danah and I are very good friends, and we've known each other for years and years. And it's kind of one of those situations where you forget like that your friend is this amazing doctor because you've had so many experiences.
I don't act like one.
No. Yeah, I have two doctor friends, and we're always like, hanging out during our normal girl things. We're like, oh yeah, you guys are doctors. Cool. But I do want to tap into her amazing wealth of knowledge and experience and just help out, hopefully, mamas that need it right now. So yay. Thanks, Danah.
Thank you. Well, yeah, so this is sort of like my worst nightmare. And I think not because I'm afraid of public speaking or anything, but I think I don't like presenting myself as an expert on anything. But you encouraged me, and it did help me to sort of realize like my job is helping me, like helping people is helping me. And if this is going to in any way help more people, then I'll do it for you.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Okay, so yeah, like you said, I am a therapist, a psychologist in Iowa, and I work in a private practice, and I primarily work with adults and teens. So I do work with kids where I test them for like autism and ADHD and learning disabilities, but my therapy work is adults and teens. So when this COVID thing hit, my job changed overnight, like most people, and I shifted to telehealth. So I'm doing all my therapy like this at home. And I've sort of been on a quest to figure out how I can help my clients the best way possible during this, while adjusting to the change, And one of the first things I noticed from day one was everything they're going through, I'm going through. And there's like this huge collective experience about it, which is actually pretty beautiful, but also like kind of drove me to figure out, okay, so if we're all experiencing it, then at a like fundamentally at like a brain level, we must all be wired very similarly when, like you said, everything's novel, nothing makes sense. We're, getting inundated with fear and threat and change. So like fundamentally our brains must be doing something similar. So I've sort of been on like a journey of trying to educate myself about that as much as possible, to help my clients understand that what's happening is they're not going crazy. Like what's happening in their brain is totally what's supposed to happen in this. And then give them the suggestions of what to do. Because like personally, when I'm told to take deep breaths, like, I don't know, it just has never been helpful for me. But it's actually becoming more helpful now that I think about it from this way. So that's kind of what I wanted to try to do in this little talk, is help whoever's listening sort of understand from a brain-based perspective what the heck is happening, and then provide suggestions of what to do. So I'm not focusing a ton on what's happening with your kids' brains, although if you sort of think about this as like, well, if I can better manage my brain, I'm probably going to mirror that back down. It's probably going to trickle down to the rest of the family. Kind of like you were saying, like, how do I take care of my family when I'm under all this pressure? So I know I sent you, Betsy, a ton of the links. I just want to make sure credit's given out where credit's due. A lot of these things aren't my brilliant ideas. So most of the brain stuff I'm talking about comes from a guy named Dr. Bruce Perry. And he's got these super helpful educational videos about the pandemic and the brain that I pretty much took this from, but watered it down a little. But I sent you the link to that if you ever want to watch it. Okay. So any questions before I jump in?
No, I love it.
Okay. So first things first is like what's happening on a like fundamental level. This is not earth-shattering news, but our brain is having a stress response, right? So like our arousal is going up and then staying up, and so then that is changing how we think, how we feel, how we process, and how we behave. Literally everything about how our brains were operating before has probably changed for most people. And on some level, like when I say stress, I don't mean like stress the way we think of it, of like, oh, these things I have to do. I mean like changes in our arousal level, like the stress level of our brain has changed. And in a lot of ways, that's usually a good thing. Like stress is how we change. Stress is how we improve and adapt. But that's usually in circumstances where we can control it, like the stress that you go through when you decide you're going to start your own business or run a marathon or whatever. It's predictable and controlled and up to you. And so your whole brain can kind of show up to the party for that stress, right? But this stress is like uncontrolled, unpredictable, and prolonged. So it's just, even if you're not actually feeling stressed about what's going on, you know something bad is happening outside your four walls. And that app is always running kind of in the back of your mind, even when you're asleep. And so one of the things Dr. Perry was explaining was it's really pivotal for us to understand how our brain responds to threat and fear, because even if you don't think you're afraid, part of you is. Part of your brain is operating from a place of threat and fear, maybe constantly, maybe not, but it's changing how you're behaving, so it's important to understand. So he outlined this like continuum of arousal, and I'm not going to talk about all of them because it takes too long, but I'm going to kind of focus on the first three because I think that's probably where most of us are swimming around. And the first one, which I thought was pretty cool, is called calm and reflective. So this is like the most adaptive place we can be. And what was interesting about what he was saying was, given the way our lives typically run pre-corona, we actually don't go to this state very much because we're always so busy. So we actually don't have very many opportunities to be in that brain arousal state normally. And one unique cool thing that this quarantine is bringing us is opportunities to go to that stage more.
Totally.
Because, yeah. So like, even though there's a lot more fear and arousal and stress, we have more time and quiet, and like our brain is actually, that's part of what I'm talking about today, is try to help you get there more. For some people, they've been riding on that, pink cloud a lot. And for others, maybe they haven't had it at all or just minutes of it, but you actually are more able to experience that now than you were before. So that's the good news part that we'll come back to.
Okay.
But that's when, again, like your whole brain is open for business. Like you can reflect and be abstract and think about the meaning of life, and kind of like what you and I were talking about, like your spiritual journey and what do you want to change about. That's when you're in calm, reflective state. And it's a pretty awesome place to be. Then we move away from that and go into like low level alert, which I would kind of explain as like just daily grind, normal alert, that we all know. And then we move into like heightened alert. And I would sort of describe that as like the first few days that we were like, schools were canceling, like you're finding out restaurants are closing. Like when the panic starts to hit, he explained how we sort of do something called flocking, like how birds flock. Like it's when we're the most susceptible and contagious to other people's panic. So you are like, you're losing sight of your calm, like adaptive brain. Your brain is going, something's wrong. Are you freaking out? Do I need to freak out? Like it's when we're the
Are you buying toilet paper?
Yes.
I'll buy toilet paper.
This is where toilet paper came in. This is where like freaking out about the news came in. It's the first stage before we move into fear, where we're trying to figure out, am I supposed to be afraid? Something's telling me I'm supposed to be afraid. And so I bet most of us have moved beyond that. But what I'll say is that you might go to that. Like, I know I went there when I was like, okay, they're about to call school for good. And I was ready for it. But even when I heard it, I found myself kind of looking around and be like, who's freaking out? What am I supposed to do? Kind of thing. So that one's like the flocking mode. Okay.
Okay.
And if you think about it as like, that's when I'm the most contagious to other people,
Okay.
good, bad, or indifferent. And then we move into alarm state. An alarm state is like, uh, the main thing he described, which when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what happened to me, is the first thing that happens when we move into alarm state is our sense of time collapses. So I don't know if you felt that, but it's like, I didn't know what day it was, hour. I'd be like, how is it 3 or how is it only 9 a.m.? Like, time didn't make sense. And that's actually a brain response to stress, which I didn't know.
Whoa.
But it's a brain's response to stress. And the other thing that's happening is slowly that part of your brain that's really calm and reflective and reasoning and problem solving is your brain doesn't want that part to be on, because we need more energy for survival.
Okay.
So you're becoming more childlike. So
Oh.
this is where buying the toilet paper, this is where you're looking out for number one. Okay. So like, this is where you're not thinking about consequences. Your time has collapsed on itself. So you're just thinking about right now. Like, what do I need to do to keep myself safe right now? You're more likely to be impulsive, reactive, immature. I mean, I can't think of a better way to say it, but just not like yourself, because you're threatened. And so if you have found yourself, if you've just been like, why am I handling it this way? Why am I doing that? Why did I? Probably because your brain was in some sort of alarm state. And so you were operating from a place of survival. Then the next two stages that I'm not going to talk about as much are called fear and terror. So I'll save those for some other time. But basically, they're about when you go into alarm state for so long that we're talking post-traumatic stress disorder, like total collapse, can't cope kind of places, which I hope, the sad thing is that I think we're going to see a lot of higher rates of that. We already are. And that'll be the second pandemic, I'm sure, after this one, is cleaning up the mental health mess.
Well, especially in like, I mean, the nurses and doctors, like those frontline workers, I just am like, oh my, we're sitting at home. Like, I think I can think about it 10 times a day, but they're the ones that are experiencing all that. So I'm sure.
Yeah, their brain needs to be in alarm state to survive. Like, they absolutely have to be there. They can't be calm and reflective, because that's a waste of time. Frankly, they need to be like in that state of like make quick decisions, and so they are, at more of a risk of moving into kind of that post-traumatic level.
So is that possible? Like, say, a nurse is watching or whatever. Is that possible for them to be in that state while they're working and be able to decompress and come home, or is that super hard to do?
I mean, I think the simplest answer is it's possible, and it's going to depend a lot on a lot of things. So it's going to depend on what their level of arousal was before all this started. Like, if they already have anxiety or depression, or things to be like if they have an abusive partner, or like something that's actually fear-inducing anyway, it's going to be harder for them to mitigate the stress, just because the demand is so high.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, my hope is that, with some of the suggestions I'm giving, some of the awesome resources that are out there, and like I was going to say at the end, like, for a lot of people, this is the time to start therapy. This is the time to start getting outside help. Most of the like research about post-traumatic stress disorder shows that early treatment, working with people while they're in it, is actually predictive of it not turning into post-traumatic stress disorder. So people getting help quickly and knowing that it's okay to get help is important.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay. Let me see, what did I want to say next? Oh, so So basically, I'm focusing on those main three in summary. Like, I think it's fair to assume if you have a pulse, you're somewhere on that continuum every day. And that's why when I check in with people, they're always like, God, it just depends on the day, it depends on the hour. Yeah, you're moving along that continuum multiple times. And then the other thing that's really weird about the pandemic is that one of our greatest brain buffers to stress is social connectedness. Like, that's something that actually helps our brain know we're safe, is to be with our clan and to get like connection. And now that was ripped away from us too. So those two things paired together, like threat and fear arousal, and our main way to soothe being taken away, has made this like extremely unique and unprecedented, right? Um, let me see here what I wanted to do next. Oh, okay. So the next I kind of wanted to talk about, like, well, what do we do about
Yeah.
that? So, you know, the pessimistic or the bad news side of this is the stress part's not going to go away for a while. Like the the reality or the demand our brain is going to have on it to process this stress is going to stick around for a while. And so we can't change that, but we can start to kind of look at, okay, so in light of this new world I'm in, where my brain is going to be more aroused and stressed, what can I do to help move myself into calm, reflective more frequently, or fill up sort of my resilience reserve uh, to respond to that demand?
Yep.
So the first couple things I wanted to mention is, if you can remember that your brain is actually wired to become more resilient and healthy. Like, your brain naturally responds well to stress. Like, naturally, stress can make it healthier, better, more resilient, but you have to know how to respond to it, dose it out, to maximize that. So try to not be too afraid of the fact that your brain is in stress mode, and just know that actually your brain has a lot of tools to make this positive, if you know what you're doing, like if you know how to respond to it. And then the second thing I wanted to say before I gave suggestions is, you just have to know. So you and I were kind of talking about this before we hit record, but you just have to know that certain things are going to be harder. Like, most of my clients are talking about, like, I hardly work even half as hard as I did before and I'm wiped out, or it's 10 o'clock and I'm ready for a nap. When I was watching those videos, Dr. Perry explained, you are going to be fatigued and exhausted more easily. So quit trying to tell yourself you're not, like, let it go, accept that you are going to be more tired. That isn't a sign that something's wrong always. It can just mean you're going to need to give yourself a little grace around fatigue and energy level, and that making decisions is harder. Like, if this part's getting turned off more frequently, it's probably not the best time to be making like big life decisions if you can help it. So if there are some of those decisions where you and your husband or you and your partner are talking about, like, what do we want to do with whatever, if it's something that can wait, just wait. This isn't the perfect time to be doing that.
Like, should
So
you
with that,
wall purple or not?
yeah, should I dye my hair?
Should I wallpaper again?
Yes, exactly. Um, but then kind of the main thing I've been doing with clients, which isn't that like sophisticated, but it's helping, is name it. Like, know where you are on the continuum, check in with yourself multiple times a day. So I've been kind of calling it like, take your temperature, like, just take your temperature, check in with yourself. Where am I? Am I in calm, reflective? If I am, awesome. If I'm not, like, what's going on? Am I feeling paranoid? Am I feeling agitated? Am I exhausted? Because it's really important. You're not able to do anything with it if you don't know where you are.
Sure.
And I think about it like temperature. Like, you're not going to know what you need to do if you don't know if you have a fever, right? So I've been doing that even with myself regularly. And I put a little prompt in here to remind myself to even just use you as an example of, maybe not necessarily right in this moment, but can you think back to a recent moment where you would have benefited from checking in with yourself to see where you were at?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think at the first part of this whole situation, I feel like those when you talk about time, I was like, thinking in your mind, oh, we're gonna like have to stay at home for, 6 to 8 weeks. You can't even imagine that. And now it's been like 4 or 5 weeks, and you're like, where did that time go? But
Mm-hmm.
the first few days for me was very up and down as far as like I was almost like on a weird high. Like, and it was probably just my whatever self preservation kicking in of some sort to like not feel everything. But it was almost like I relate it to like weird things when you were a kid that are bad, but actually that get you really like your adrenaline kicked in. Like when there was a tornado siren, I would be like, ooh, like it was exciting or something. It's not really like happy excitement. It's just like some sort of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's how I felt at first. And then a lot of that fear stuff came in, and then I had to like find a coping method, which
Yeah.
I is one of my next chats like about kind of what I've been doing with meditation. But I
Yep.
can now, like, I definitely feel myself. Like, my time that I get bad is like after the kids go to bed at night, when I
Ditto.
can either choose to do something that would benefit my mental health
Yeah.
and help me fall asleep, or I could choose to sit on like social media and news outlets and like fuel that. And
Yep.
so I've had to make a conscious decision. And sometimes I can handle, like, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm fine to be on Facebook for 10 minutes and I'm not affected by it. And other times I'll see something and I'm like, and then I have to get off. So that's
Totally.
definitely been,
That, I mean, that's you jumping into what I was going to talk about next, but it's like you're gauging when you can take in doses of more stress and when you can't.
yeah, absolutely.
So, like our phones and our consumption of media, that's stress we can physically dose out. And
Mhm.
so if you are checking in with yourself and you're like, yeah, I'm in a good spot right now to hear the news, um, I'll hear it. And if I'm realizing, nope, it's actually sucking me into more paranoia and that social contagion, I'm going to pull myself out. But yeah, I would definitely agree that for me, when I'm noticing like the most important times to take my temperature are in the beginning, it was a lot like right when I'd wake up, almost like when you've experienced a death or something where when you wake up and you remember it's true and you kind of panic. I was having to sort of check in with, whoa, I'm waking up really alert and aroused and stressed. That's past now, but for me too, it's also after the kids go to bed. It's like if you have kids, they're really distracting, and that's hard, but they're also really distracting, and that's awesome
Yeah.
because it helps you to have something else to focus on. And once that child is asleep, then you might be more susceptible to kind of moving into that, oh my God, what are we going to do, or whatever
Right.
mode. So yeah, so I've been trying to just help clients, patients just name it and normalize it and just know, okay, yeah, if I'm freaking out about what the heck's going to happen with my job or what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen to the world, that's normal. My brain is wired to do that. I'm just going in an aroused state. And even if you can just name it, it's not like you're telling yourself it's irrational because it's actually not irrational. It's actually rational fears you're having. But instead of it being like here, you're just looking at it like, sorry, I can't see my hand. Like here, like you can look at it from a distance and go, oh yeah, my brain is freaking out right now. I'm a little scared about the future rather than I'm supposed to be scared of the future. If that makes sense.
Right.
Kind of like creating some distance around it. And I know you mentioned meditation, which I'm going to bring up here in a second. But so naming it first, normalizing it, validating it, and then we move into like what do we do about it, And so he described, I stole that term from him, of resilience reserve, but he described that like just doing nothing every day, you're going to be tapping out more of your resiliency reserve just by the nature of the pandemic we're in. So we can't change that, but what we can do is just keep visualizing ways to add to our reserve, like keep refilling that tank daily. So things that he brought up that do that, which are all, again, not earth-shattering things, but super validating to hear from an expert, is structure. Like
Okay.
daily structure is super important. Remember, when time collapses on itself, we
Mhm.
become little children who are freaking out. So we need to know what time it is. Like we need to know what we're supposed to do. We need to know what our purpose is. That is just the same way your kids need it. we need it. So daily structure, and I think it's important to say here, I work with all different kinds of people, and everybody's daily structure is wildly different. So I don't think it has to be a certain way.
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
but structure, exercise, and sleep hygiene are the no-brainers, but the ones that I think if you're a little slower to getting on the curve of like getting on board with those three, you may have had a harder time. But knowing that exercising is not just like so that I don't, gain the 20 pounds I'm on my way to gaining. It's also helping my resilience tank. Like it's actually helping me respond to the stress better is a motivator.
Okay.
Uh, and then the other things he brought up were positive thinking. So like I tell my clients, like, I am not even going to waste my time trying to convince you not to be scared or not to be catastrophic about, because I'm doing it too. Like,
right.
Your brain is wired to think about that. All I'm asking is that you add some more things to the buffet, like add, or maybe no one I love will get sick and we'll all come out of this super grateful. And maybe we will change for the better. And maybe, my kids will always remember blah, 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 so don't battle the negative thoughts, but just add some positives in is super important. And then meditation. So I don't know how many people are familiar, like in your kind of following with meditation, but I sort of have this like love-hate relationship with it because as a therapist and psychologist, I've been inundated with information about why it's helpful, but I'm also so I have trouble slowing down myself. So like it's always been a hard thing for me to do until I finally did it, like until I finally found my way. So I found an app that does it for me. And then it was like, I was off to the races and I understand why it's helpful. But really what meditation is getting you to calm, reflective state. So it's not making you not afraid and it's not making you not think about things. Like sometimes people think meditation means I'm supposed to not think anything. No, it's just helping you notice what your brain is doing so much so that you move into calm, reflective state. So you saying once I started interweaving that, I've kind of had less bumps in the road. It's probably because you're taking your brain to that more reflective place, turning on the other parts of your brain, etc. So there's that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because I feel like I've done some forms of meditation, in the past. And I think the biggest part or the biggest time period was when I was pregnant with Wesley, my second pregnancy, that I was doing that. But I, again, never really stuck or never really stuck. But I think, I don't know what it was. I feel like there's also, like you said, I had to find the way that would work for me, and that like almost I've been using this because Davis, my 6-year-old, this is his favorite saying right now: life changing. I'll give him a muffin, life changing, mom thinks. But like really like that, there'll be like a little tweak, or like you finding an app, or like mine was like getting my routine at night. Like I do this. There's like 5 things, and that includes it. And then like I've been doing that every single night since then, and so like, but before I might have been like, oh well, that seems like a lot of work, or like you said, like our routines are changed. We would be like maybe working before bed or doing whatever before bed. So I'm super interested to learn more about like that, with how that's helping our brains, but also just how we can help people to implement it or find a way that works for them too.
Well, the cool thing that's been coming out of this whole thing is that industries that market mindfulness and meditations are like offering more free resources.
Yeah.
Like if anyone who listens to this is a provider, like like a nurse, a doctor, a therapist, this app called Headspace that's normally like $90 a year is offering it for free to anybody who's a health fitness provider. So there's lots of ways you can consume it. You just got to sort of find what works for you. And then I think for me, what shifted was, oh, I need to do it. It's like before it's like, yeah, that would help me and I'd be more enlightened and blah, blah, blah. But right now it's like, no, I need to do it. I need to do it. It's like you said, it's part of my routine. It's what's going to make me a little more sane tomorrow, or fall asleep, frankly, most of the time.
Right.
So yeah, that's one. And if you can think of it as I'm actually filling up my reserve when I do it, and I need to do that. When I brought up research on PTSD, there's actually research about military people getting ready to deploy, and they've done studies on mindfulness training. So they've trained some of the soldiers in mindfulness and meditation before they deploy, and then others who didn't. And the ones who were trained in mindfulness and meditation had lower rates of PTSD when they came back. So
Wow.
it does work. I mean, it really does help kind of mitigate your response to trauma. And this is traumatic. Like this really is. Even if you haven't personally experienced any major losses, this is still traumatic to the brain on some level. So I've been trying to look at it as something I need to do. And that's been helping.
Okay, this is a random question and it may be out of your, but is there something that triggers in your hormones with meditation in that like calm and reflective state? Because it feels like to me, one of the things I've liked about it, or I've like craved, two other experiences I've had in my life. One is with acupuncture, like almost like a little like high feeling. And then two is with nursing, breastfeeding, and that like oxytocin letdown
Yeah,
hormone that's like
yeah,
almost like a wave of like calm goodness.
yeah.
Is it like, is there
I
connection?
don't know. I would be willing to bet yes. I would be
Yeah.
willing to bet that a lot of things are happening, like dopamine levels, the same way with exercise, that cortisol levels, I bet, are dropping. Don't quote me on it, but I bet,
Sure.
like, yeah. And again, you're aware enough to notice it. That's the cool thing, is you're
Right.
aware enough to go, whoa, something just happened. I feel calm. I feel good. You're not going to be able to recognize that if you're not taking your temperature. Like if you're not in that state of going, okay, that felt really good. I need that. I need more of that,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. But no, it's a good question, actually, one I should look into. But I would be willing to bet yes.
We're not
Um,
talking about hormones anymore.
yeah, yeah, I know. And then the other thing is so those are the things that I was mentioning. Like I said, none of them are earth shattering, like daily structure, exercise, sleep, um, eating with your family, being positive, helping others. But also like if you take your temp and you're in a calm state, embrace it. Like know that it's probably fleeting. Like you are not going to stay in that utopia forever. So maximize it. Like it can be create. Like that might be when you, Betsy, are like, oh, I have this great idea or this way I want to reach people. So you write it down and you kind of daydream about it. It can be art, it can be music, but it can also be like, for me personally, sometimes those moments happen with my kids where I'm like, I just want to make this moment meaningful. I just want to make story time not about getting it over with tonight, because I feel good. I feel like I'm paying attention to how his little hand looks next to my hand, and so I like embrace it for that minute, because I know I'm probably not going to feel that way every bedtime,
Mm-hmm.
for this week. So if you aren't paying attention to your temperature, you're also going to miss when you're doing well. I think is that's like kind of what I want people to think about, is there are moments that are going really well right now, too. And so just not missing them and maximizing them. And this is where I think you asked me in like some of your questions before, was like, why are some people doing better with this than others? Is that what it was?
Yeah, like why are certain, you can kind of tell like your friend group, right? Or even like on Facebook, your temperature of like certain personality types, whether they're like super type A and they're like, okay, can you give me an exact date, May 14th at 8 a.m. I will return to work and everyone will return to school.
Sure.
Great. But
Yeah.
there's not that end date. There's not a plan
Yeah.
and they can't see, like, it's almost like they cannot see in front of them because there is no plan or end
Right.
date to it. And then other people are like, I love chilling at home. I love watching my Netflix. Like,
Right.
whatever. Making
Right.
soup today. Great.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I would argue probably that they're what is putting them in arousal and fear is not knowing when they can go back to normal life, right? And that barrier and that boundary is keeping them from being able to sort of go in there. They don't know how to be calm and reflective when they don't know what's going to happen. I'm one of those people normally by nature. Like I do not like uncertainty. I do not like not knowing what's going to happen, and don't know normally how to find peace in that. But that's one of those things that I've been learning in this is like, oh, it turns out I can. It's not my preference, but I can.
Right.
But the other thing I wanted to say about that is that for a lot of, I think everyone's values are different. And if your values that, like your core values that really kind of make you feel alive, were taken away from you in this, you're more susceptible to struggling. Like if your values were about punctuality and like achievement and making a difference in your job and, yeah, any of those things, or physical connection. Like if that's one of your main, if you're a super extrovert and social connection's huge, then your sense of loss is greater. Like you and being able to kind of reflect on that and accept that you're going to have to find new ways to channel your values might take a minute. So,
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the little bit that I did watch of Kristen's presentation about judgment. Like if you think about two things, one, if you're finding yourself being super judgmental of how someone else is coping with it in either direction, like the super happy ones or the not happy ones, notice that if you're being judgmental, you're probably in that arousal state where you're like trying to figure out how you're supposed to feel. And and so judging is helping you make sense of it. So recognize that. But also I think it's important to know everyone is kind of on their own journey of making meaning out of this and grieving what what they can't have or what will never be the same. And so yeah, I think that for if your values were super tied into what your old life could give you, your learning curve is just a little bit steeper. And if your values were more about like, you know, simplicity and freedom and like creativity and whatever, then you might be like living the dream
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and I kind of I put a little like flag for me to remember to say that all the things I'm talking about right now are, I'm talking about it at this level, but if people are already people who have anxiety or depression or postpartum depression or serious loss in their life um, uh, or their lives have like their finances, like anything that's increased it, then everything I'm saying, you just take the volume and you turn it way up, right? So I don't want to lessen anyone's experience about this, but I'm trying to grab as many people as possible. But there is a chance that this is the level of stress this is causing is becoming too much for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And where these suggestions I'm giving are hardly scratching like the surface of what's going on for them. And in that case, I mean, it's helpful when someone you love tells you, like someone else being like, hey, you're not yourself. It's been days now, your sleep has been impacted or whatever. Or things are getting so bad that you're having suicidal thoughts or anything like that. That's a time that these things are great that I'm suggesting, but also you need to get in therapy. And the neat thing is, even though telehealth is not as great as seeing someone in person, it is more accessible. So someone could be in like rural part of Colorado and still access therapy in a much easier way than they could before. I don't know how things are in Colorado, but I do know in Iowa, insurance companies are waiving patients' cost to telehealth. So that's pretty cool. But I definitely want to just like make a plug for therapy. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's so helpful to have someone to talk to about it who's not directly impacted by your story. Like it's not going to directly influence their life the way it would be your partner or friend.
So let's talk about like the, I guess, difference here between like, okay, this is a situation, it might not go back to your normal per se, but like, it's going to ease into some sort of new normalness in the next, let's call it 6 months. Mm-hmm. Is there like people start with therapy and like see how that goes? Or is there something like that we're going to do in this meantime to work on ourselves, or a difference you're seeing between like, I don't want to like push people to medication because a lot of the stuff I do is really holistic, but I also want to like bring this, which I think it is, the mental health stigma is being brought to the forefront so much more in conversations, especially in motherhood, that like you would say, okay, let's get you medication help and work on therapy in this process and see where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like with my patients and even with myself, part of taking my temperature is I've set, how will I know it's gotten bad enough
Okay.
that I need medication to help me or my client, you know? And
Yep.
so I think for everyone that might be different, but some fundamental things there would be like, if I'm having major impairments in how I emotionally operate, my work, like I'm withdrawing from people, I'm having suicidal thoughts, like those types of things. But everyone's might be different. For me, I know personally, I've set this red flag of like, okay, if I can't bring myself out of alarm um, every day, like if I stay there all day, then I know I need help.
Yeah.
So far, so good. So far, I've been able to like go, whoa, that's where I'm at. And then I use these certain tools but if it feels like I can't, that's when I know I'm going to talk to my doctor about meds because I'm doing everything else already. I'm in therapy, I exercise, I meditate. So
Right.
I feel good about knowing that's when I'll know that I need so yes, I think there's that piece. Then the other thing to your question is, again, kind of like the opposite of how I typically operate. But thinking about how it's going to look in 6 months, I think can be so fear inducing and stressful and overwhelming for people because how it looks today doesn't at all look like how it looked on March 19th or
Right.
February 19th. And so I personally have been kind of like, when patients want to talk about that, we sort of like look at it at a distance. Like, what do you think it'll be like? And what do you want? Like, kind of almost like from a fantasy standpoint of like, what do you want to emulate? What do you want to be able to look back on and say, rather than getting too lost in planning for it? Because again, I don't think we have the resources in our tank for that. Like, we don't,
Okay.
it's not a good use of your reserve to be channeling a lot of work into how I want to be in 6 months because you need to be filling up your tank for right now, right? But that's weird for me because I'm always thinking about the future and I'm always trying to, anticipate what's coming next. But I'm realizing it's a waste of the energy, and we're learning so much, like we're learning so much about not only coronavirus but ourselves in it and what we're capable of. And so anything we might think we'll be able to do then might look totally different. So I'm okay with people fantasizing about it when they're in calm, reflective state. But if they're in like aroused state and like, what are we going to do? Okay, no, like stay here, stay in this moment. There's enough in this moment to focus on that we can set 6 months aside. Does that answer your?
Yeah, I think it's neat too because like I feel like for me personally, there's been a lot of like upheaval in just my work and also just how I am living my life and thinking about things and doing things. And I think it's like I have a goal in mind of like I don't even know if this makes sense, but like, okay, I want to be this person of like more of my like true authentic self. And like, I know things are changing daily, but like, how do I get to there? Like, we're just going to keep on like keeping on each day and see what happens, So I think it's like, I don't have like specific things of the future, but I know like there's a place I want to get to.
Yeah.
And it's almost this weird thing about like, now that we're starting to see peaks and, plans for reopening, I'm like, ooh, like in my like mental, like so many people have related this to like a butterfly or caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, right? So like we're in this cocoon stage of like reflecting and creating and changing and all these things. And I'm like, even in my mind, I'm like, as we think about reopening, I'm like, am I ready for like, am I there yet? Like, you know what I mean? Like, have I even changed? I don't know.
Yeah. Have I changed enough?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, so funny, but anyway.
But really, again, to kind of link it back to what I'm saying is I think what your brain is doing, Betsy, is your brain is taking the stress and finding ways to make it predictable, controlled, and malleable. Like, okay, so I've been dealt this situation. I want to, the same way it's like I've decided to sign up for a marathon, or I decided to open a
What?
business, right? No, like some part of you has accepted, okay, stress is coming in. I want to take some of it and make it controllable. I want to make it predictable the same way I would if it was something else, right?
Yeah.
And so and so I like that, and I think that's you adapting, and that's you trying to be as resilient as possible. And I have clients that are like that. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to be there. And some of my clients who are there have had these little, like, they're trucking along and it's like all this creativity and like they're reshaping their values and they're just like growing and it's magical. And then, you know, their friend's dog dies and they can't hug their friend. And it's like, oh my God, like these moments where they're confronted with the other side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll still move back to calm and reflective. They'll get there, but there's like a blip and they have to sort of like sink into the uglier parts of this whole thing.
Yeah.
But they can get back to, so it's just like, doesn't mean you're not still progressing. It doesn't mean you're not still getting better, but you're just going to slide. You're going to slide along, So I wanted to also kind of like link this a little bit to parenting, just what you were describing and what we're talking about. So one of the things Dr. Perry talked about, which I also found really helpful, is if you take your temp and you're in that bad state, arousal, alert, alarm, fear, whatever, and you're agitated and you're, remembering, oh, okay, so this part of my brain's not online. So trying to use this part to calm myself down is not going to work. So trying to like, reason and think about, what I know about COVID or whatever, that's not going to be the fastest way to regulate me. The fastest way to regulate me, according to Dr. Perry, is rhythmic, repetitive, predictable behaviors. So he described how, like, even in the womb, the way our nervous system regulates is through repetition and rhythm, our mom's heartbeat, her voice, how she eats the same times of the day. That means we eat at the same time of the day. So we were literally wired from before birth to regulate through rhythm. So he described, like, if you are in that state, quickly do something repetitive and rhythmic. So if it's pet your dog and just sit there and pet your dog, or take a walk, or breathe. Again, that to me, that was a place where I'm like, oh, now I can buy into why deep breaths would help me. It'll actually will like be rhythmic and regulating. And even if you think about when you have your child and you rock them, that's what you're doing. You're regulating their nervous system with repetition, pattern, predictability.
Is that where this like tapping, I've seen some stuff on it, but I haven't really experienced any of like the tapping mechanisms comes in?
Maybe. I don't know what you do. You mean like this?
There's like I just saw a video recently about how to calm yourself down, or anxiety, and like it's a tapping, you like tap up with your
probably. I mean, anything where you are, so this is one that we like teach is like butterfly. So if you just like make a butterfly with your hand and then you just like bilaterally just keep tapping while you breathe, it will calm you down with time. It might take a while, but it will calm you down. And so
that's like a good one for kids.
Oh yeah, I've taught it to my daughter. It's like just to do this, knowing that you're not solving the world's problems by doing that. You're not treating your anxiety by doing that. You're just bringing your regulation, your dysregulation to regulation. So first, like full caveat, I fail at this every day. But when your kids are being gremlins and they're being insane, like you can't regulate them if you don't first know your temperature, right? So like before I snap and yell, if I can take my temp and go, whoa, like I'm child, like I'm not like, I don't have my positive parenting strategies on board. I'm not rock, like literally just stand there and rock, or take a walk around your island a few times, like 4 or 5 times. When we're all trapped in a house together, we can't do a lot of sophisticated things, but you can always find rhythm. You can always find, and you can get them to do it with you. Like, let's just sit here and rock on the floor. I know I found myself the other day, I was sitting on the lawn with my husband and we realized that we were both unconsciously ripping out the grass. like just like doing this, and
That's
I
really
was like,
nice.
why am I doing this? And then I remember, I'm like, oh, I think I'm like calming myself down, because it's just repetitive and rhythmic and sensory. So when I think about how are you regulating yourself when you've got these little kids around, whatever ages they are, trying to remember it starts with me. Like I cannot regulate them if I'm not regulated, and that they're contagious. Like we are so contagious to one another. So if they see you calming down, they're likely to calm down, and vice versa.
Yeah. Not
Um,
only like that, but also biologically, right? It's like the whole airplane mask. Always put your mask on first and then help your children.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when I said I fail at it, it's like usually when I fail is when I'm trying to do two things at once. So like I'm responding to an email from a patient and they're stressed out. So now I'm like trying to give them my attention and I'm kind of like meeting their arousal. And then my kids over here, like sixth sense goes off that I'm busy. And so they're gonna start like doing something crazy. And then I turn around, I'm like, "Bleh," and I just yell instantly. And if I had been able to just take a step and go, whoa, okay, I need to put this down. I need to just kind of like do this for a little bit, or take a couple laps around the block, and then respond to whatever they're doing, you'll be better off. And in this time when we're all kind of coexisting together, I think that's just becoming more and more important
Yeah.
to do that.
And definitely like I think too, giving your kids my kids are at this age where they play really well together and also fight really well together, but at the same time I can recognize when like Davis, the older one, like do you just need to go to your room and like be by yourself for a little bit? And because I mean they're like so stimulated by each other all day long and then us, and so
Yeah.
it's finding that like balance. But I can definitely see him because we need that too, right? Like that's where we're hiding in the bathroom on our phones.
Exactly.
Like we
Exactly.
need like that too. So
Yeah. I mean, even phones. So I've been thinking about that a lot too. Like, normally in therapy and even in my personal life, I'm talking about like cutting back on your phone use and why it's like not good to numb out like that. But this is a weird time when I, I think a little bit of dissociating is actually like necessary. Like zoning out, as long as it's not stressing us out more, again,
right.
like depends on what you're consuming, but zoning out, or even like for me, sometimes checking in with all of our girlfriends and all of us complaining or sending a funny picture about what's happening in our house helps me to know I'm not crazy. We're all in this isn't some weird dream I'm having.
Right.
It's connection. Like our phones now are actually becoming more sacred in some weird ways, whereas before I sort of saw them as the enemy to mental health. Now I have a little bit more of a love hate kind of thing going on. So
Well, it's just forced people to pivot and be creative in ways that we haven't had to before. Even, and thank goodness with like technology. I mean, even like 20 years ago, this would look very differently, but like we had, Davis's birthday party with a Zoom party and like all of Jensen's aunt and uncles from all the way from California to Germany were on. We don't see those people on his birthday. We would
yeah,
never have done that
yeah,
before.
yeah,
And I think, oh, how cool is that? We got to see so many more people than we
yeah,
would in Colorado because no one lives here.
yeah.
So I feel like it's just forcing us like with what we have available, with digital means and technology, but also forcing us to be creative in how we adapt to those situations and letting go of like I got to I'll share this link too, but I got to contribute to an article at the Denver Post about how to still have celebrations
Yeah,
during this time period, like birthdays, anniversaries, and stuff like that, and just gave some ideas. But like part of it is like letting go of like this picture perfect that like, okay, but last year's birthday, we were all at the rec center and all his friends were there and blah, blah, blah. Like that can't happen. Like, okay, now what are we going to do to make it? Like what are we going to use in our toolbox that we have in our house? Like what Halloween costumes can we dress up as? Like you just have to like let go of a lot
yeah,
of stuff and be able to start to create and make new.
absolutely. And I think our kids are like our greatest teachers in this. I know everybody's children are different ages and different personalities, but I'm realizing things that I thought would be like totally earth shattering for my kids, like not being able to have a birthday party, and they're adapting. Like they're great models to me to be like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. Or, and then the other thing you mentioned about connection with people is this funny thing is happening, because you're right. We're talking like I did a FaceTime with family members who I literally never FaceTime with.
Yeah.
Is there's this funny thing happening where because we all know on some deep level we're all going through this, like whether your family member lives in Japan or Australia or here, we are all going through this, makes you want to connect with them more, which I hope when you talk about like 6 months from now, I hope we can somehow like drink that Kool-Aid forever and like just remember that like we all are in this together no matter what this is. Like if it's just life, to know like, yeah, I want to know how my uncle in Alabama is doing. I want to FaceTime with, because we're all in life together, even if it's not fear or whatever. So yeah, there are some of those kind of beautiful things coming out of it. Doing therapy has been really um, just neat, because it's showing me it's just different for everybody. Like it's different how much they're moving along the spectrum, and it's different what they're making out of it, and no one is doing it better than someone else. They're just adapting differently. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love this quote. I think it was Amy Porterfield, but she was talking about how, like, isn't it great that, like, literally no one is expecting perfect right now? Like, not your work,
Mm-hmm.
not like other people, not your family, not your friends. Like, everyone has given this, like, bottle of grace to carry around with them during the day. And, like,
Yeah.
you need to accept that yourself too. Like, no one's expecting you to be perfect. And so I think that's really cool, just to, like, relieve some of that pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that that's something that sticks too, like
Sure.
I hope that sticks too.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to end it with like a little fun question for
Oh
Dr. Danah. But any last thoughts on anything? I mean, we've
yeah.
a lot of great info.
Last thoughts. Um, well, one is like if you are interested in any of the things I talked about, go consume information. Like download meditation apps. I know I gave you some links of things of
Yeah.
places that have free audio recordings.
And I'll post.
Um, watch more videos. But my main take home is like get creative with how you socially connect, because that's your brains. We feel safest when we're with our clan. It's just the truth. So like find ways to get with your clan, even if you're not doing much but just sort of venting. And then also, if you hear this and someone you know or you are recognizing, man, it's getting pretty bad for me, like the things she's talking about I cannot do, then to start to, this might be the perfect time for you to seek therapy from the comfort of your home and get some extra added help. And I was going to say, Psychology Today seems to be like the best place to find all providers. And my hunch is that the majority of providers, no matter where you are right now, are doing telehealth because it's the only way they can do their job.
Right.
So
So
start
they might not
calling.
even be in your area,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
which is really interesting to think that that's like a totally new dynamic, right? You're
Yeah,
like, you saw patients here. Now you can see patients really from
yeah.
anywhere.
There are some state line requirements, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely get those resources. I know a lot of people's, health insurance will have like a teledoc or telehealth separate app or whatever program it is. Um, that makes that easy to find too. So
Yeah, yeah.
use your resources. Okay, awesome. So I did want to end with a fun thing just to touch on, Danah has 2 kids and is living through all this and it's interesting. We've had this conversation before. I know you touched on it, but like how rare for you to be, working with your clients on things that you are also experiencing
Yeah,
in some form or another. Obviously
yeah.
everyone's different, but like in general, like you are living through it and learning through it as well. So it's just really kind of a rare, interesting experience. But okay, so name one thing that you've liked or loved about this situation, one thing you've disliked or not liked about the situation, and one thing you found super surprising about this situation.
Okay. So liked has been watching my kids thrive in it. Like I guess I could have gone under surprised too, but like I never thought that like they were gonna love it. And like so watching them play and get super close to each other and like being like, oh my God, this whole time they didn't need piano and soccer and like they just want us all together, and their love. And so like that's contagious. So I really like that. I mean, I don't like it every day, to be honest. Um, but that I've liked and disliked. I mean, if we have 30 minutes, I could come up with all kinds. We were watching TV. I told Brian like, oh, just anytime I see restaurants, it just gets sad. I just I miss seeing my friends. I miss like hugging, and I miss going out to restaurants and being served.
Yeah.
So those things I miss. And then surprised, I think my big one that I have also been trying to help clients see is like, I'm so surprised that I can live with this much uncertainty and still be me. Like that's like not me. So it's like I'm surprised by what I'm capable of, I guess, is like, oh, it turns out I can be afraid that everyone I love is going to die legitimately and still be joyful and like silly and put food on the table and like that I can live with both at the same time is a huge surprise to me. So I hope I make the most of that later.
Yeah, it's very like, sometimes you'll see someone like on social media, like their opinion or their feeling about something. It's like, yeah, I feel that. And then the next minute you're like, but I don't. But I do, but I don't. Like it can change so quickly too with like just how, by the hour too.
Oh, totally.
But yeah, I know there's so many things that like literally, even think about Christmas. Like if someone were to say, okay, in 2 months, here's the gist of your life. It's like, what the fuck? No one thought that.
I know. I mean,
And here we are.
Both my kids' birthdays are coming up here in a couple weeks, and we've been thinking the same thing. Like, okay, so when we were in more like that alert state, it was like we better order stuff now before we can't get stuff like for gifts. And now it's kind of been like, oh, I think they're just gonna love like having people drive by and honk, and so yeah, yeah.
Yes, all that and above. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your information. I know it's obviously a lot to take in, but I think it's super helpful. And also, if you take away, 2 things from this, I think just from, my personal, like last 30 days, I can tell like just little things make the biggest difference, especially in this time period. So,
yep. And finding what works for you and then like basically getting acquainted with yourself. Like I'm learning, oh, I do much better on the days where I work out first thing. Okay, so now I'm going to work out first thing. Like when you were like, oh, I do these 5 things before bed. Well, that was your rhythm and repetition you found, and it works, so you're not going to stop. Like everybody just finding what that is for them, no matter what it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I also add one more thing because I think it was funny how I've been in like mom groups. I kind of posted about this, but for, since probably I was pregnant, so 6+ years, like, and they've been helpful at times or, connecting people. And I love that. And I love supportive and I love positive. And even like amongst our close friends is a lot of like bitching and ranting because that's what we do. And that's what we know. And that's a safe space to do that. Right. But like, I just had this experience like last week and I was like, I don't need to see this and to get riled up. And I just like left the group and then I left all the groups and I was like, holy shit, like I can make a decision because that does not serve me right now. And I don't want to get upset every time I see that or have to deal with like how I should react or if I should react. I just left. And now it's like not going to come into my life anymore.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I can do that. Like I can give myself permission to like not have that be a part of my life anymore and have it be totally fine and better for me.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I like
it. And that's again something you've always been capable of doing, but now you're doing it because you have to. And
yeah.
so like just remembering that later of like, no, I can. Why don't I always operate like that? Why don't I always operate like, hey, I need to always be making sure my reserve is full. And being on Facebook before bed takes a little bit away, and I don't want that, so I'm going to stop doing it or whatever.
Yeah. Like making those conscious choices has been huge. So
just don't cut me out. I'm not okay with that.
cut you out. Doctor. Doctor. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Love you
Yeah.
so much, and
Love
hope
you too.
everyone
Thanks for encouraging me to do this.
shares with their mama friends, and gets the help they need when they do. We're all happy and healthy.